Today's Daf is Shabbat Daf Tzaditet. Today's shiur is dedicated in honor of Judy Berman to celebrate her birthday. Your dedication into the Daf is inspiring, and we love you so much. Love from your children. And it's also dedicated Le'iloi Nishmat David Meir Shavit ben Alma Lipa, whose yurtzeit is on Shabbat, dedicated by his children who have joined in the Daf Yomi learning. And with that, we will start. We're starting from the very bottom of Tzadi Chet Amud Bet. Okay, today I'm going to show you some pictures from the Mishkan book that we also saw yesterday. And we're going to start from the very last line of Tzadi Chet Amud Bet. Charutzim hayu kashim, v'chalulim hayu ha'adanim. Okay, now we talked about the beams that were in the Mishkan, and we talked about and now we're going to talk about the bottom part, which is that all of the beams went into a socket. Okay, so I'm going to show you a picture of the socket and the beams. If you're not watching on the YouTube, you might want to look at it today. Okay, you might want to see, because it'll be helpful to see the pictures. So here we have a picture of the beams, or the top part, with these two parts sticking out. We'll see that in a minute. And then they fit into a socket. Okay, so there were parts coming out of the beams that would fit into this socket that went at the bottom. So that's the krashim hayu. So the charutzim hayu krashim, they had these ridges coming out, and chalulim hayu adanim, the sockets had holes, and they would fit right into each other. It looks like a Lego kind of building toy. Obviously, it wasn't a toy. It was in the Mishkan. This is what they used. And now, when we go back to the first layer of the cover that went over the Mishkan, remember there were several layers. So the first layer of the Mishkan was made with this tchelet argaman, the tolat shani, these different colored threads, and it had loops that would attach the two big pieces together. And these loops looked like stars when you look from the inside. Okay, so now we're going to see that the loops, you can see in the picture here, they attached, okay, that was made of these strips. There were these strips, and the strips were sewn together, and then they were made into two, basically, they took all the strips and they sewed 5 and 5 together because there were 10. And then they put these, there were 50 loops, and they went into these little gold circles. And when you looked up from the Mishkan, from inside, it's this nice effect, you would look up and it would look like stars in the sky. Tanu Rabbanan, because remember, it was the bottom cover, so when you were inside, you could also see it from the inside, and obviously the outside looked the same also. Tanu Rabbanan, Yiriyot HaTachtaniyot Shel Tchelet V'Shel Argama V'Shel Tolat Shani V'Shel Shesh. Okay, this is what they were made of. They were made of Tchelet, Argaman, and Tolat Shani, right? The Tchelet, the blue, the Argaman, the purple, and Tolat Shani, the scarlet. V'Shel Shesh, they were made up of threads that were 6 threads together. Ve'Elyonot Shel Maaseh Izim, the one that went above it was made of Maaseh Izim. So the one that went above it, we talked about this a long time ago also, it was this gray, okay? You see this is the Tachash, the red one. That one we're not talking about this time, but this gray one. This was made up of goat hairs. So that one went on top of it. Ugdola chachma shene'emra be'elyonot yoter mima shene'emra betachtonot. The chokhmah to make the top one was more difficult. It required more talent than the bottom one. Di'ilu betachtonot k'tiv v'chol isha chachmat lev biyadeh hatavu. V'ilu be'elyonot k'tiv v'chol anashim asher nisa libam otana b'chokhmah tavu et ha'izim. Okay, so before we explain, let's start with going backwards and explaining what I just read. The lower one, the Mishkan, it was called, the first cover, was said about it, every woman chokhmat lev, who was intelligent of heart, which really meant she was intelligent and competent to be able to make it, biyadeh hatavu, she spun it with her hands. Doesn't really mean, I don't know if it means she literally did it with her hands, but she used her hands, and with her hands spun with whatever equipment she needed. Be'elyonot k'tiv, v'chol anashim asher nasa libam otana b'chokhmah tavu et ha'izim. It says they spun the goats. Now, Betanya, Mishum Rabbi Nechemia, and it says, Abraita, in the name of Rabbi Nechemia, we actually learned this also before, Shatuf bi'izim v'tavuim min ha'izim. It was a special talent they needed where they were able to wash the hairs while they were still on the goat and spin them while they were on the goat. It was some special talent that they had. And therefore, the one that was made of the goat hairs required more talent than the one below. Now we're back to our issues. So we finished closed circle of all the issues of the covers on the Mishkan. And now we're moving back to the Mishnah. Shtei gezuz traot. So remember, the Mishnah was discussing back on, I believe it's Sadi Vav Amud Aleph. So we talked about Shtei gezuz traot zo keneged zo b'reshut harabim. You have two porches jutting out from Reshut Harabim, and right, they were jutting out from the Reshut Yachid, and there's Reshut Harabim in between. Hamoshit v'azolek nizol lezo patur. So now the Gemara is going to start. Amarav mishum Rabbi Chia. Agalot. Now we're going to talk about the wagons. Tachtehen ubenehem v'tzidehem Reshut Harabim. This is what we saw yesterday. The wagons underneath them and in between them and on the sides of them was considered Reshut Harabim. Amar Abaye, ben agala la agala kimalo orech agala. In between each, there was two wagons next to each other, and in between, the space in between was the same as the length of each agala. V'kama orech agala, what's the length of each wagon? Hey amot, 5 cubits. So now they say, basically they're going to say, in between each wagon, if you have a wagon with its wheels, and you measure the space between wheel to wheel, you end up with 5 amot, which is the same as the length of each of the wagons. Both the Koren and the Schottenstein have very helpful pictures, if you have those. Amar Abai, so ben agala la agala kimalo agala, and that's 5 amot. So then they say, lama li b'dalidu palgasage. Why did you need them to be 5 amot wide? Theoretically, they could be 4.5. Why? Because we already discussed that the beams either went, right? Let's assume that they went the 1.5 amma each. They were 1.5 amma wide, and that was the width that went on the wagon. And they had 3 rows of 1.5. So theoretically, last time we discussed that there was a 1/4 of an amma in between each one when you laid them across, because again, the wagon was 5 amot long, and they ran the other direction, and they fit in that 5 amma space, and we had 3 rows, 4 krashim on each row, and if you put them all together, each is 1.5, with the width is 1.5, theoretically it could have taken up a space of 4.5. Why did you need the extra 1/4 of an amma in between each row? You could have just put them all together and had it take up the space of only 4.5. So what did they answer? They didn't want the krashim to rub against each other. They wanted there to be space. It was better to protect each of the beams. Amarav, tzidei agala kimalo rochav agala. The sides of the agala were also the same as the width of the agala. V'kama rochav agala. What was the width of the agala? The length of it was 5 amot. The width was 2.5. That's what they're going to say right now. Shtei amot b'mechza. So now they say the space of the wheels of the agala also took up a space of 2.5, which means each one was 1.25. So you have the wagon is 2.5 width, and then you have another space on the side of each, which is 1.25. And that's where the wheels are. The kama rochav agala shtema b'mechza lamali. Why? Ba'amta upalga sage. So again, why did you need the wagon itself to be 2.5? If you're lying the krashim, the beams, across, they're basically resting now on this 2.5 amma space. And then again, you have the 2.5 amma on either side, right? You have a 1.25 on either side, which adds up to 2.5. But why did you need the wagon itself? Basically, we're assuming, right, it was on some sort of a beam, and that's where they rested on. Why did you need it to be that wide? Theoretically, it just could have been 1.5. 1.5 is enough to support the beam. Now, remember, the beams were 10 amma long. So we're going to answer, which is probably what you're thinking, which is lididu krashim. What's going to happen if you put something that's 10 amma long on a space of 1.5 amma wide? It's basically going to wobble a little bit, and we want them to be very stable. So we're going to put them on a space of 2.5, and that gives it enough support that it won't start falling. Ela dekaimalan derech reshut harabim 16 amma. Anan de gamrina lemi mishkan, de mishkan chamesh havya. So now, havya amta yetera hava. So now they say, what's the problem? We learn Reshut HaRabim from the Mishkan. Now, what's the Mishkan? Well, they walked with these 2 wagons, and that covered the space of the Reshut HaRabim. So let's do the math. How much do we have? Each wagon took up a space of 2.5 was the wagon itself, was the width. Then 2.5, 1 1/4 from either side of the wheels. So that gets you up to 5. Then we said the space in between each wagon is 5. So we have each wagon is 5. The space in between is 5. That gets you up to 15. Why 15? It should be 16 because it says the Reshut HaRabim was 16. And we learned it from the Mishkan, right? The Mishkan chamesh havyan. It was only 15. So amti yetera have. So now they say, I read it before as part of the question. It's not. The question ends with the Mishkan chamesh have. It was only 15. So the answer, amti yetera have. There was an extra amma to have a Kai ben Levi. There was a Levi who would stand in the middle there. And he needed an extra amma of space. If any of the krashim fell, he would pick them up. Because remember, what was the 5 amot of space in between each? That wasn't for empty space. That was where the beams jutted out. Each side it jutted out 2.5. Because remember, the wagon itself is 2.5. The sides altogether equal another 2.5. That's 5. But each board went across a space of 10. So it jutted out 2.5 this way, 2.5 that way. And then the other wagon also 2.5 that way, 2.5 that way. So in between the 2 wagons, you end up with 5, which makes perfect sense. But now they're going to say there was a space, and it's not clear exactly, was it a whole amma of space? Normally we talk about how people, the foot space that people take up is 1 amma's worth. In the Mizbeach, we talked about it. There's always an amma's worth of space where the Kohanim walk. And it came up recently also where there was an amma of foot space of a person. Came up with something about the shiurim of the amma's foot. I forget exactly where it came up. But we see that obviously probably in between the 2 wagons was a person standing to make sure that if the wagon started wobbling, he would be able to pick them up. New Mishnah. Chuliat habor v'hasela, shehem gvohim 10 ורחבן 4, הנוטל מהם והנותן על גבם חייב, פחות מכן פטור. If you have a chuliya of a bor is a pit. The Mishnah is talking about here the chuliya of a pit. What's this? This is the banks of the pit. They would make a bit of a wall surrounding the pit. So if that wall, they took some of the dirt from inside, we'll see this later, and they would kind of make a wall out of it. So if this wall, or a sela, or a rock, which are 10 tvachim high and 4 tvachim wide, this is our standard shiur for what? For a Reshut Yachid, a private domain. Hanotel mehen v'hanoten al gaban chayav. If you take an item from it, or you put an item on it, this is in the public domain, but it's a private space within the public domain. So if you put something on it or take something off of it, then what do we say? Chayav. Pachot miken patur. But if it's less than 10 or less than 4x4, then you'll be exempt. Gemara asks, Lama li lemitne chuliat habor v'hasela? Litne habor v'hasela. Why didn't you just say a pit of a pit itself? Why did you need to say the banks of the pit? A pit itself should be a problem also. So, Maseiah le Rabbi Yochanan, this must support Rabbi Yochanan. De Amar Rabbi Yochanan, bor v'chuliato mitztarfin l'asara. Let's say your pit is not 10 tvachim deep. Say it's 5. And then you have banks of the well of the pit, which are also 5 high. So now you have 5 height above kind of the top of the well or the pit, and then you have 5 below. So the pit itself is going to connect with the chuliyah, and that's going to all be viewed as one. And that's what the Mishnah is teaching you by saying chuliyat habor. It's to say that the chuliyah is like the bor, and they can even join together. Tanya namihach, here's a brighter to support this. Bor b'Reshut HaRabim amuka 10 u'rechava 4. If you have a pit that's in a public space that's 10 tvachim deep and 4 tvachim wide, ein mimal'in hemenu b'Shabbat, ela im ken asula mechitza gavoa 10 tvachim. You can't drink from it on Shabbat. If you're in the public domain, you can't drink from this pit. If it's full of water, you can't drink from it unless you make a mechitza around, you make a border around the space where there's a place for a person to stand, and then you can drink from there. Okay? Ve'ein shotin hemenu b'Shabbat ela im ken even then, you still can't drink from it. Unless, by the way, I didn't point this out, but this beginning part of the Braita has nothing yet to do with our topic. It has to do with things we're talking about a bor, but we brought it to prove the issue with the bor and the chuliyah can join together. We haven't gotten to it yet, in case you're wondering. So we say here, if you have a bor in Reshut Rabim, in the public domain, you have a pit, and it's full of water and you want to drink from it, if you built a border around it, you built a mechitza that was 10 tefachim, a wall that was 10 tefachim high, then you can drink from it under the condition that the majority of your body and your head are in that space. If not, and you lean over into that space, what's the concern? The concern is that you might take the water and you might remove it from that space into the public domain, and therefore we don't allow it. So therefore, the majority of your body has to be in there. This, by the way, is where they came up with a solution called pasei bira'ot, where they built these little wall-like structures that weren't full walls around all these pits to allow people, when they were going on Aliyah L'Regel, they were going up to the temple for the holidays, they would need to drink on the way. They didn't have water fountains. This was their way of having water fountains, but they couldn't drink on Shabbat, so they made a solution where they'd be able to drink from there. We came across it before. We'll come across it a number of other times. Sorry, I missed that. Then the last line, which is what we read this Braita for, was Ubor v'chuliato mitzarfin l'asara. And in fact, when we talk about 10 tefachim here, we're talking about the bor and the banks of the pit can join together to create the 10 that are going to basically say that this is its own private domain. Rav Mordechai now asked Rava the following question. Amud b'reshut harabim gavoa asara v'rachav arba'a. If you have a pillar, some sort of pillar in the public domain, it's 10 tefachim tall and 4 tefachim wide. Now, what do we say? That's a private domain. Bizarak v'nach al gabav mahu. And you threw something. I made a little diagram on the sheet. If you have the sheet that I made for today's daf, if you throw something on top and it lands at the top of this, what do we say? Okay, he wants to know, are you obligated? Okay, mi amrina, do we say, hare akira bi'isur, hare hanacha bi'isur. When he uprooted it out of Reshut Rabim, and then he landed it in a private domain. So you would assume this is problematic. He threw it from public to private. O Dilma, or maybe we say, kevan de mimakom ptur ka'atya, lo. What happens when the item goes from, remember, this beam or pillar is 10 tefachim tall. That means when you throw something from the public into the private, where does the private start and end? It starts and ends in this object, right? But above it, what happens when you throw something, and also above will be Reshut Yachid, but when you throw something from the public domain into it, imagine as something gets thrown just before it enters the space of the Reshut Yachid and lands on the top at this area that's above 10 tefachim, it's going to enter the airspace of 10 tefachim. So basically, you're not going to be able, it's going to end up going through this area that was exempt. So you're basically taking something from public to an exempt space to a Reshut Yachid. You shouldn't be obligated from Torah law because of this. So he says, how do we look at this? Amarle mi matnitin hi. This is exactly our Mishnah. What did we say in our Mishnah? If you throw something, if you put something on or take something off, it's obligated, even though it passes through this exempt space. So there you see it. So the first answer is matnitin hi. He wasn't happy with this answer. This Rav Mordechai asked Rava. He wasn't happy with Rava's answer. He asked Rav Yosef. Amarle matnitini. So that's exactly our Mishnah. Ata shayle la Abaye. Amarle matnitini. Also said it's our Mishnah. So all these people seem to say it's a problem. Amar lehu. He gets very frustrated, Rav Mordechai, and he says, Kulu biroka dahadad fitu. You're each spitting out the spit of the next guy, meaning you're just regurgitating what you're hearing everyone else is saying without actually thinking about it. You're all saying, oh, it's the Mishnah, it's the Mishnah, it's the Mishnah. But it's not really the Mishnah. Amarle, Ba'alo tizbara? Do you really think it's the Mishnah? The Hatznan, it says in the Mishnah, Hanotel mehem b'noten al gaban chayav. Sorry, this is my mistake. Amar le, they said to him, I'll repeat that line now. They said to him, what, you don't think so? What does it say in our Mishnah? Hanotel mehem b'noten al gaban chayav. It says exactly this case. You're taking from public, you're going to private, it's 10 tefachim high, and you're putting it and it's passing through the exempt space. They say to him. Amar le says back to them, Tilma manitim b'machat. Maybe it's with a machat, a needle. Okay, in which case a needle, one second, I just want to think about what I said because I think maybe I read it right the first time. He says, they said right, and then he says, right, sorry, I did say it right the second time. He says now it was using, maybe it's with a needle, in which case you can't learn it from our Mishnah because maybe the Mishnah was talking about a needle. Now a needle is very small. If a needle's so small, then it didn't necessarily have to go into the airspace of the public domain above 10 tefachim before it landed at the top of that wall. That's what he says to them. So he says, you can't prove from our Mishnah because maybe our Mishnah was talking about a needle. It's not clear that in the Mishnah, it actually passed through an exempt area. Whereas in my case that I'm asking about, says Rav Mordechai, where you threw something and it went, right? If you throw something there, it has to go a little bit up in order for it to land on the wall. So now they say to him, even a needle, it still has to go a little bit above. It might be a very little bit, but it's still a little bit above. And it does sound like it would have passed through the public domain above 10 tefachim, in which case you see from our Mishnah again, you are obligated. So he answers, no, you could say, De'ile morsha, inami deramya b'charitza. It could be that what we're talking about in the Mishnah is there was a little bit of jutting out and it went on that area. Or it went, maybe there was a little charitz, a little hole, and the needle went into there. And that's what we're talking about with the bore or with the sela. Maybe it went into something over there, in which case it's still not so clear. Here, this would be, it was going into a space. Let's say the rock had a piece jutting out of it or a little ridge inside. And it could be he put the needle into there, and that's the issue. And it doesn't necessarily mean you can't read the Mishnah and assume that it went above 10 tefachim, and therefore he says you can't learn from our Mishnah. Amar Rav Mesha. Now Rav Mesha comes and says, by Rabbi Yochanan. Now we get to another question. Rabbi Yochanan has another question about the space. Kotel b'reshut harabim gavoa asara. We have a kotel in the public domain. It's 10 tefachim high. Ve'eno rachav arba'a. It's not 4 by 4 width. Umukaf lekarmelit. And it's functioning as a wall for a carmelite. A carmelite is a big space that's not, first of all, it's not surrounded for purposes of living spaces. One of the best examples is a stadium, football stadium, soccer stadium, any kind of stadium where people don't live there, but it's a big space, but it's not big enough to be considered a public domain, or the water, the yam is considered a carmelite. So if you have this wall that was functioning as a wall for a carmelite, it was in the Rishut Rabim public domain, and then it functions as a wall also for a carmelite that's right next to the public domain. And then what happened? It seems, it's not 100% clear, but it seems that one then came and put more walls up, and this wall now became surrounding an area that was walled in, which now turns that area into a private domain, a Rishut Yachid. So now what happens? Remember, though, that the wall itself started out being a wall of a carmelite in a public domain, and it wasn't 4 by 4. So it wasn't its own, didn't have 4 by 4 width, it wasn't its own space. So now if you turned the wall into a wall now that functions as a wall of a private domain, and you threw something onto that wall, mahu, what's the status? Do we say, since this was a space that was 10 tefachim high, but not 4 by 4, generally that would be an exempt area. So since it functioned originally as part of a carmelite, maybe it's a makom p'tur. O dilma, kevan da'asa'o reshut yachid. Or do we say, since now it became a wall of a reshut yachid, of a private domain, kiman de male damya. Do we view this as if it's full, that kind of means as if this is part and parcel of the private domain, which means that if you put something on top of that wall, even though the wall itself is not 4x4 and enough to be considered a Reshut Yachid, it's now functioning as a wall for Reshut Yachid, and therefore maybe we would say that you're obligated for passing something from the public to the wall. Then you'd be as if passing it to a Reshut Yachid. Amar Ula Kal V'chomer. We're going to learn this from a Kal V'chomer, which is La'acherim oseh mechitza la'atzmo lo kol sheken. If this wall functions to turn that private space, that walled-in space, into a private domain, then it itself is not going to be considered the private domain. What kind of a ridiculous thing is that? This is a wall right now that's functioning as the wall of a private domain. Of course it's going to be considered like a private domain. Kiman demal yadami, some people, it's actually strange because Rabbi Yochanan said, do we view this as if it's full? What does it mean it's full? I didn't explain it so well. What it means is that since it's not 4x4 itself, but now it functions as part of something that is 4x4 wide, this private domain, then we view it as if it's fuller, as if it is 4x4 itself, because it's attached to something bigger. So when Ula answers, he says, of course, it's part of this bigger object, this bigger space, which is now a private domain, and it's going to be considered along with it. Itmar Nami, it's also said, now I just want you to remember the people. Rabbi Yochanan asked the question, Ula answered him. Now they're going to say it's also said, and you're going to find this a little funny, Am Rabbi Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav, v'chein Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yitzchak also passed down in the name of Rabbi Yochanan this exact halacha, which is strange because Rabbi Yochanan asked the question, although it's very likely that after he got the answer, he held like Ula, in which case later they passed down also in Rabbi Yochanan's name, and also it was said in the name of Rav, that Kotel B'Reshut Arabim, and here's the exact same case, Gavoa Asara Ve'eno Rachav Arba Umukaf LeKarmelit. It was 10 high, wasn't 4 wide. It was used as a wall for a Carmelit, and then Asa'o Reshut Yachid, he turned it into a private space. Hazorek, or someone did, Hazorek V'Nachal Gabav, if somebody threw it and it landed on the wall, Chayav. And why? And they give the exact reason that we said before. If it's going to function as a wall to turn this into a private domain, then obviously it itself is going to be considered a private domain. Another question Rabbi Yochanan has. By Rabbi Yochanan, for Tish'ah, if you have a pit that's 9 tefachim, it's not its own private space because it's not 10. But then, what did you do? Akar mimenu chuliyah. You took out dirt in order to make the banks of the well, of the pit, bishlima la'asara, and then you took that dirt and you made it the banks of the pit, in which case it now, and it was 1 tefach tall, it now is 10 tefachim. Okay, so what's the question here? At this point, you turn it into before it was part of the public domain, it was part of public space. Now you turn it into private. So now, mahu, akirat chefetz v'asiyat b'chitza b'hade hadade ka'atu, do we say that by taking the dirt out, right, turning it into the banks of the pit, are we basically saying that you now are causing it, you're moving this item from the private to the public? I have to just correct one thing with what I explained here. It's not that he made it into a chuliyah. He took out a chuliyah, he took out a chunk of dirt and took it out of the pit. That's the issue. So he takes the dirt out of the pit, and while he's doing this, he basically turns the pit into a private domain and then removes it. As he's removing it, he's, number one, creating a private domain. At the same time, he's taking it out now into the public domain because he picks it up and he moves it out. So are we going to say that at the same time that he's taking it out and removing it to Reshut Harabim, to the public domain, he's actually creating the private? So the whole obligation of moving something from private to public is only because right now, in his act of taking it out, he turns the original pit into a private domain. So follow, they're happening all at the same time. So how do we view this? Do we say that? Or do we say, no, you're not obligated because it wasn't a Reshut Yachid until you took it out. So it wasn't a private space to begin with. And even if you want to say, maybe in this case, look, it didn't have a mechitza that was 10 deep, didn't have a wall that was 10 deep when you took it out. So therefore, right, only as you dug up and pulled it out, then it turned into, so therefore you're not going to be obligated. But what if let's give a different case. Let's say it was a bora sarah. Let's say it was 10 to begin with. It was 10 deep. Binatam letocha chulia. You took dirt from outside, the public you took it from, and you put it into the pit, which is private, and it was private originally. So now we're going to say, since it was private originally, and then you put dirt into it. Now, what happens as you put the dirt? Since it was 10 to begin with, what happens when you put the dirt in? We say, Bor v'natan l'tocha chulia mi'ata, ma'u hanachat chefetz v'siluk machitza b'hadei hadadei ka'atu. Mechayev or lo mechayev? Since when you put the dirt inside the pit, you basically turned that pit into, you took away a whole hand's breadth of space, and it's no longer a private domain. So do we say, since as you move the item from public to private, you destroyed this from being a private domain? It's no longer private. But do we say, since it started as private? Remember, the first case, it didn't start as private. The whole thing was considered in the public. But then, since you now turned it into, it started as private, but as you put it in, you removed it from being private status, would you say you're obligated or not? So the Gemara says, Tif shalemi dide. Why don't we learn it from something he himself said? Yochanan asked the question. They say, let's look at something else Rabbi Yochanan said. Ditnan. It says in the Mishnah, Hazorek arba amot b'kotel. If you throw something 4 amot in the public domain and it lands on a wall, now the assumption is it's exactly 4 amot you threw it, and it lands on the wall. Lamala me'asara tfachim. If it's higher than 10 tfachim, kizorek ba'avir. It's like you threw it in the air. It's in the airspace of an exempt space, because 10 tfachim above is exempt space. It's nothing. Lamata me'asara kizorek ba'aretz. If it's lower than 10 tfachim, then it's as if you threw it on the ground and you'd be obligated. Vazorek ba'aretz arba amot chayad. If you throw anything 4 amot in the public domain, we know you're obligated. The Havina ba, but they ask the following question. You throw something at a wall, what happens? We learned this. It boomerangs back. Right? It's not going to, you threw it 4 amot to the wall, but it's going to fall right back down on the floor, and it's going to fall at a space that's less than 4 amot. So how could you possibly say that this would be a problem? Amar Rabbi Yochanan himself said, Bidvela shmena shaninu. What are we talking about there? A sticky fig that you threw at the wall and it stuck to the wall. Okay, and that's how we have it. Now think about it. If you're standing at a distance of exactly 4 amot from the wall and it sticks on the wall, it's actually not, it didn't pass 4 tfachim, 4 amot, 4 cubits, because it sticks to the wall, which is just a little bit less than 4 cubits. So the Gemara asks, V'amai, ha kamimai me arba amot. It's actually less than 4 amot that it traveled. So they answer, hatam, and therefore they want to say, let's just make the jump. Therefore, in our case, when Rabbi Yochanan asked if it started as private and then you made it less, it sounds like it's the same kind of idea. And if in the wall we obligated you, then in the pit we're going to obligate you, even though theoretically you're turning this wall into a Reshut Yachid as you dump. You're canceling out the Reshut Yachid status as you're dumping the dirt in. So it seems similar, though it's not exactly similar. And that's what the Gemara is going to say. Hatam lo mevatele, hacha mevatele. When you throw it at the wall, you're not moving the wall further closer to you or anything. You're not actually canceling out the status of the wall. Whereas when you throw the dirt into the pit, you're actually canceling its status as a private domain. So therefore, you wouldn't necessarily be able to learn it from there. So we don't end up with an answer. And likewise for our next question. By Rava, zarak daf. Let's say you take a piece of wood. V'nach al gabe yetedot. So it's a piece of wood. We have to assume it's 4 by 4. 4 by 4 tfachim, and nach al gabe yetedot, and it falls, it lands on these pegs that are in the ground that are 10 tfachim tall. So now you're going to end up with something that's 10 tfachim in height with a board on top that's 4 by 4 wide. But the beams weren't 4 by 4 because usually when you put something on top, right? Like imagine a table with legs. The legs are always in the middle. They're not at the edges. So likewise here, they weren't 10 by 10, but now you put this board on top. They weren't 4 by 4, but the board is 4 by 4. And it stands on these legs. My kamid ba'ile. So now we want to know what? What is the status? So now the Gemara has to explain his question. Kamid ba'ile hanachat chefetz v'asiyat machitza b'hadei hadadei ka'atu. If he's asking, what happened here? You put down, what happened here? You threw the daf, this piece of wood, onto the legs. So now, when you put it down and you created the walls, all of that happened b'hadei adadikatu. So again, are you obligated because now it's a private domain that you created, but it wasn't private when you threw it there in the first place? So if that's your question, that all happened at the same time, Hani do Rabbi Yochanan, that's the exact question we just had. Ki kamibayil, and it can't be that he's asking the same question. Ki kamibayil Rava, his question was like this: Kigon dizarak daf b'chefetz al gavav. You threw at the same time this piece and something on top of it, a piece of wood, and let's say a little stuffed animal was on it, and you threw it. What do we say? Again, do we say, well, it all fell at the same time, and therefore, and then it's just like creating the mechitza at the exact same time, okay? And then as we look at it as the object fell and the board fell all at the same time, and the private domain was created at the exact same time that things landed on it. Or Odilma Kevandelo Efshadelo Midla Porta Vahadernayach Kasia Machitza Vanachat Chefetz Dami. What happens when you throw the board and the stuffed animal at the same time? As you throw the board and the stuffed animal, they land, but usually what's going to happen, that smaller item, that stuffed animal on the top, is going to bounce. And when it bounces, it's going to lift up and fall back down. So while it's true, at the first second, they all landed at the same time, since that item bounces and lands again, maybe it's not considered that it landed at the same time. And then you could say, at that moment, you're actually obligated because when it actually lands, when it comes down for its solid landing, it's already after the mechitza were already created, and the Reshut HaRabim is already, the Reshut HaYachid, the private domain, is already its own domain. So the Gemara answers Teku, we don't have an answer, and we will pick up from here on Sunday. And again, just to remind you, if you want to join the Zoom, the details will go up on Sunday about the, actually the Zoom details are in the Facebook. There's a Facebook invite. So if you have that, the Facebook invite will be there. I'll send it out on WhatsApp groups also as a reminder on Sunday. And please come join the Zoom. We'll get to meet at least virtually. And as I said, I'll teach the daf regular, and we'll have questions and answers after.